I would like to continue with the angular topic, and I would like to use the rest of the lessons after the lightning talks to dig a little bit deeper into Angular's component model. That's the idea of today. I think that's a good topic for the remaining time that we have today. So what I have here in my Visual Studio Code is an Angular application that I created in the morning in the exercise lesson with some of you. And we will take a look at how these components and how this app is structured. Close the window here. In Angular, everything is based on so-called components. Let's take a look at these components. Here we have such a component. It's the so-called app component. It's the root component that is auto-generated whenever you create an Angular app. You will find the app component in an Angular app if you create it on Seclist, and you can find it here. And now I would like to draw your attention to this part of the file here. The app component, Angular's component, is just a class, as you can see it here on the screen. But this class has something special on top of it. Something like this, with the at the beginning, is called a decorator in TypeScript. Maybe you've heard about this concept in other programming languages too. In C#, for instance, these things are called attributes. And in TypeScript, they are written like that, with the at the beginning. And then you have the name of the decorator. And every component in Angular needs to have a component decorator. This is what makes the class into a component. So what is a component? The goal of a component is that you can structure your user interface work into separate pieces, just like you structure your logic into separate pieces using classes. In the first semester, when we worked on web projects, you always created one large chunk of HTML and you have put it into the index.html page. But you can imagine if you create a larger project where many developers contribute to this project, you need a way of separating the UI into separate components. And that's exactly what this system is all about. So an Angular component represents a visual part of your application, and later on you can take all these components and put them together and place them on the screen. Okay? You can arrange them differently. The point is, it's a way of structured programming for a user interface framework. That's the idea of a component. So what's an Angular component made of? First, it has a selector. The name of the selector, in this case app-root, this name of the selector creates a new HTML tag that represents this component. Let me show you that by opening up the index.html. This is the root of everything, because index.html is the one HTML file that is loaded in Angular, and as you can see here we have this app-root. Is there an HTML5 element that is called app-root? Of course not. So what we can do in Angular by creating components and by setting the selector here, we can extend the language capabilities of HTML5. We can add new custom elements. So whenever you create a component and you would like to display this component anywhere in your HTML structure, you just use the selector here. Okay? The second thing that is necessary is the so-called template root. The template root is the name of the HTML file which represents this component. And in our case, it's just a demo HTML file. We don't care about the content here. The point is, here, in this component, we can reference this external template. As an alternative, we could also remove the URL and add the HTML code directly here. That would work too. So if you have a very small component that only consists of a few letters of HTML, you can get rid of the URL and you can directly add the HTML code here. I would recommend to always use this way because it's much easier to maintain, and in real life HTML tends to become a little bit larger. So this is a better one. The last one is the style URL. As you can see here we have the styling. It's currently empty. What is important to remember is that the style that we have here in the Angular component only applies to this component. So if I define a style here, we can do that. I can show you that. Here we have, for instance, an H1. So I can go to CSS and define, please format all H1s with a background color of, I don't know, yellow. Okay, good. If I do it like that, and I go to my browser, localhost 4200, then you will see, of course, my H1 has a background of yellow. That is not a big surprise. But the point is that this color for header 1 is only applied to this component. So if we have a second and a third and a fourth and so on component in my app, and they also have a header 1, my style will not be applied to them. It is a local style for only this one component. Okay? And that's a big thing. That's really important. Because think of, you generate one component and you generate one component and you both define formatting for H1. So which one to take? Typically, you get into conflicts. You have to say, okay, I call my styles like this and you call your styles like that, but try to coordinate that in a larger project. It's really a mess. With that, it's easy because styles are isolated on component basis. Get it? Okay. Last but not least, there is one important information that you need to have in order to understand everything. All the components are at the end of the day arranged in so-called modules. Now what's a module? What's an Angular module? In the first semester we have learned what a JavaScript module is. Can you remember? What is a JavaScript module? A file. Every file is a JavaScript module. Every JavaScript module is a file. The problem is, I told you that in the first semester already, if you work in a larger project, your modules tend to become larger. It is not a practical approach to put everything into a single file. That doesn't work like that. So we need to have a kind of module system that spans across multiple files, and that's exactly what Angular brings to the table with the modules. So what you can do is you can take all your components, think of, you could have a module which is called the administration module, or the customer management module, or the ordering module, or the accounting module, and you group all the components that you have that belong to this module into an Angular module. And as you can see here, there is a declarations section, and this declarations section has to contain all the components which are part of this one. Okay? Good. So let's try to play with that a little bit. Let's create a new module and try to display this module in our app component. If we want to create a new component, we don't do that by hand. On the contrary, we do an npx ng generate component, and let's say this is a numeric input. That's good. And let's do a dry run, if you can remember that from last week or today, depending on when you had my training lesson. The dry run shows us what the system would generate, and now we can take a look at it. And you see, I used the name numeric input, and it automatically appended the word component here. So that looks pretty good. So we can remove the dry run and run it. That will give us a new component. It's called numeric input. It is. And as you can see, let me quickly start my zooming tool. It's already running. Yes, it is. Sorry. There it is. And as you can see, the Angular CLI has created a new folder in our source app directory. So for every component, it creates a new folder. And inside of this folder, we see we have the implementation, TypeScript, the view, HTML, the formatting, CSS, and the unit test, spec. This is the unit test file. We don't care about unit test at the moment, so we can safely remove the spec file. We don't need it. Now let's take a look at the numeric input file. The numeric input component TS contains a selector. You see it, okay? So what we can do is we can take the app numeric input here, go to our app component HTML, maybe simplify this stuff a little bit because we don't need this blah blah here. Let's do it like that. And at the end, we can just say, please display the numeric input here. So we use the selector of the new component to insert it into the parent component. Let's see whether this works. Woohoo! Numeric input works. This is exactly what we want to have. Got it? Great. So now, if we take a look at the app module, we will of course recognize that the new component is now part of the declarations. And that's absolutely necessary. Luckily, we don't need to do that by hand. This is done by the Angular CLI automatically. So whenever you create a new component with ng generate component blah, then the component blah will be automatically imported here. Okay? Yeah? We could also easily create a new module. Let me show you how that works. You don't need to follow along, but you can. I will now not use the Angular CLI to create a new module, but in reality you should. I want to put everything in a single file so you can easily follow along. But this is not the recommended way, it's just for demonstration purposes. I can create a module, can say here I declare the numeric input. I don't need an import here. I don't need a bootstrap here. But what I can do is I can say exports, as you can see here, and I can say I export the numeric input, input utilities module. You see, now I created a new module, and of course in reality I will not just declare a single component. Think of, I don't know, user management module, and it consists of 20 components. And now I group them into a new module, and then I can use, instead of here using the declarations, I can import the input utilities module. Get it? Here we define a new module, and here we import the module as a whole. And with that we don't need to import all the 20 components separately, but we import the entire module. Later on, if you dive deeper into Angular, you will see that you can also take these modules and put them into NPM packages. So you can create kind of libraries that can be reused by multiple people. And you can of course publish those modules and libraries on NPM, and therefore make many people in the whole world use your libraries. Get it? Okay? Good. So, it still works. That's exactly what I wanted to see. And we don't have any compilers. Yeah, I was just checking. So what have we learned so far? Decorators are just like attributes in C#. They stand on top of a component and make a component into an Angular component. Modules are marked with the decorator ng module, and they summarize, they put together a collection of these components. And then we can import and export them from modules. Okay? Good. I can just check for a second. Okay, very good. So let's put something that makes sense into our component. We could, for instance, say, I would like to use an input type number, something like this, and then do a break, and then put a button at the end. Button, I don't know, reset, something like this. Okay. That will give us, as you can see, a numeric input box and with a reset button. So it's easy to use them multiple times. So if I go in add component, and if I add 3 of them or 4 of them, I will get 4 times exactly what I expect. So let's do it like that. Okay. That's it. Nothing special. This is what we expect. Now, an important use case is that the client component would like to communicate with the parent component. So the parent component would give the child component some parameters, and the parent component would like to be informed when something important happens in the child. I would like to show you how that works. we can go to numeric input here in TypeScript, and for instance say we have a public value number. And by default this thing is 0. Okay? We don't need the number because we already assigned a value. I can then go into my HTML, and as we have learned last time, we can do here a value and say bind this to my variable value. This is nothing new. Now we have zeros here. Okay, data binding works. But what if we would like to pass in this value from outside? Get the idea? Now everybody is 0, but I would like that the user, that the parent component here can inject a value. Get it? So how can we do that? Turns out this is pretty simple. What we have to do at the beginning here, we just say at input. This at input decorator makes the variable to an input variable. And by using this simple decorator, we can go into the app module, the app component HTML, and if we now begin to type, let me show you that, value equals to, oh sorry, I forgot the binding of course, and I can say this is, I don't know, 42. If we check out what's happening, you see, first is now 42. So what we did here, let me show you both at the same time, and remove that one, and do it like that. What we did now is we marked the value here in the numeric input, marked it with input here, and this is why we can now use data binding to transfer a value from the parent to the child. Get it? Parent, AppRoot, child, numeric input, and passing the value into the child. Questions? Clear? Good. Good. The question is, does it work the other way around too? Well, yes it does. And this works like that. What you can do is you can create an output. Now, output is not that trivial. Output is not that simple. We can say public. Let's say the output is reset clicked. Okay? The problem with the output, by the way, we have to import the output up there from Angular core, so the warning goes away here. The problem is, what do we want to output? My output should be a signal, an event to my parent, hey, the user clicked on the button reset. You know what I mean? So I can't handle the reset because maybe I don't know what reset means. Does reset mean setting it to 0 or -1 or empty or undefined, or I have no idea. I just provide the button as the child, and I want to delegate the handling of the button click to the parent element. Okay? And for that, Angular has a class. And this class is called new event emitter. Okay? That is on. And I would like to import it from Angular core. See? We can create an event emitter, and if we want, we can define a data type. This data type could have an additional type here, and this type indicates the payload that we send with the event. We could send something with the event, but currently it's just an event. It contains no data. Maybe we do on another day, we do an example of it. So this is an output, and now whenever I want, I can raise an event on that output. Let me show you how I mean that. Let's go to the button here and do a click event, and let's call it on reset clicked, something like this. So let's add this function here, and when the user clicks the button here, we delegate it to the parent. So we say this.resetClicked.emit. So now the child points to the parent and says, hey parent, something happened. The reset click event happened. Please do something. Get the idea? And now on the parent, and then the picture is complete, on the parent we can now say reset clicked. See that? IntelliSense recognizes our output. So just like a click event or a mouse move event or whatever event there is in JavaScript, we can now create our custom events. Custom events that can be fired from the client to the host. So let's add the reset clicked. And for demonstration purposes, we will just say, what are we going to say? We could, for instance, say on reset. I'm not very creative today, but I think you get the point. Public on reset, and there we, for instance, say console log reset clicked. Oh, sorry. So let's check what's now happening. This is our application, and if I click on reset in the client, here we see that reset clicked is called. Now, let's quickly recap what. Let's pull down the lines. You have a question?
So when I click the button, the client sends a message to the parent, and the parent calls that method.
Exactly that happens. Exactly that happens. Once the lines are down, we will recap. So what's going on here? Our component, this numeric input component, has an input field and a button, but it does not know how to handle the button click. It should be generically usable, because at one situation you would like reset to be set to 0, and the other you set it to 99 or whatever you want to do. So the child needs to have a generic mechanism to signal to the parent, hey, something happened, please do something, or ignore it if you don't need to do anything. So this is why we created an output with this event emitter. And with that, the child, numeric input, can signal an event, this is why it's called event emitter, to the parent. In our case, AppRoot. And now AppRoot can do whatever AppRoot wants to do. You get an idea? Approximately? Yeah? So for instance, we could do here a variable, my first value equals to 42. Then in app component HTML, we can find the child's value to my first value. That will change nothing. But in the reset, we can now try to say my first value equals to 0. So let's try reset, and it sets to 0. This is what we wanted to achieve. The point is, and that's the important point, it's not the child component, the numeric input, that knows what reset means. The child component just knows there is a button, and I have to tell my parents whenever the user asks me to reset the value. I have no idea how to set the value. So it sends the message to the parent, and the parent knows that in this case it has to be set to 0. But it could be set to 8. And with that, we are enabled to create generically usable components. And that's the idea. That's what I want you to understand. With Angular, we can build generically usable libraries. Libraries of components. You can build a component that many of your colleagues use in their specific module or use case. You could build a chart component and a component for entering phone numbers and email addresses, or doing a kind of customer picker, or whatever you want to do. And then put them into a component, and this component can then be used throughout your application in multiple cases. So repeat less code, reuse more code. That's the idea. Questions? If you think of the homework that I gave you last week, and it's not due today, it's due next week, we had this Turmrechnen Beispiel. Can you remember? The Turmrechnen example. And then you have, for instance, the input area at the beginning, and then you have the result area below. What you could do with the knowledge that you gathered today is you could separate the large UI into two pieces. You could say you have a parameter component where the user can enter the parameter. When the user enters the parameter and clicks calculate, you could send an event. And then you could have a second component which is called Turmrechnen result or something like this. And this will be then placed below. And the parent component will take the parameters from here, give it to the other child and say do something, calculate. Get the idea? And then you can combine these components in intelligent ways. In real life, you could reuse the code. It would be easier to read, easier to understand, and it's easier to separate, to split work between team members. Good? So, the most important things to remember from today: decorators, component decorator, modules with imports, declarations and exports, and last but not least, inputs to receive values from the parent and outputs to send events to the parent. These are the things that you should remember from today's test. Good? Okay, so if you want and you haven't done the Turmrechnen Beispiel already, you could try to use that in this example, but it's not a must. It's just a suggestion, just an idea how you could practice that. Good. And with that, I think time is off. So, great. Thank you. See you next week.